5 p.m. is 11:30.
Okay. Welcome, Internet. We're back with another casual lorecast. With me, Dwight War, and there's some other people here too. I don't know if you guys want it. Yep.
I show up every single time. I'm not worth mentioning.
I show up.
This is my second time.
Fuck you.
This is my first time.
Which is why, Daniel, we're gonna put you on the spot.
Oh boy.
What we like to do here is when we have people who come to our casual lore chats who've never been with us before, we basically allow those new people to decide the thread of conversation. So what would you like to talk about?
What do you know about the Bloodthorn Pact? I've been looking into that quest line a bit.
So that the Bloodthorn as in from the DC quest line, ESO?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that actually.
Well,
I have some info on that.
Okay.
So to teach everyone some general information that they need to know about this, I feel that it's incorrect to refer to it as the Bloodthorn Pact because it is the Bloodthorn cult. More than that, though, the cult itself is full of Reachmen. To anyone watching the stream currently, or anyone who's watching it in the future, hello. Reachmen are distinct from Bretons in that, yeah, pretty much. When you take the whole concept of ideology as skin, the Reachmen become very distinct from Bretons, and even culturally within the games, they are very distinct. They are very tribal in their politics and their culture. So the Bloodthorn cult, in particular, led by Engoff the Gravesinger, is a cult of necromancers and bandits and all that wonderful good stuff of Reachmen. Yes, Engoff is very weird.
He's the guy who binded 3 earth bones.
Yes, he is.
Which is kind of insane.
So that is the base level of information you need to know about the Bloodthorns. That they are
They're not normal Bretons.
Yes, Reachmen are not normal Bretons. They are a variant of Breton. It's the same as how what's another example? I'm not going to say First Talks of Khajiit. That would be a very good example, but that's not really how it works. Think of the very early days of the concept of Imperial, when you had an actual differentiation between Nibonese and Colovian.
Okay.
It's that kind of difference.
Ashlander and Great House, but...
Yeah, Ashlander and Great House is also another good example. The difference is primarily more in their ideology and their culture. That even into the present day of 4th Era 402, it still exists that way.
Yeah.
Or 201, I think. Whatever year Skyrim takes place.
201.
Yeah,
Skyrim takes place across all universes because of Akatosh.
Nah, that's dumb. That's not cool, and therefore it's false.
Daniel.
Yes.
What am I looking at your icon?
That is the mysticism symbol from Oblivion with a hummingbird over the bottom of it, which I also have a tattoo of.
Cool.
Yeah, that's like a little spirit animal thing. Mysticism was my favorite Oblivion spell line.
Yeah, mysticism.
And that was also my first Elder Scrolls game. Alteration is also very good.
Everyone knows that as of now, Stormcalling is the greatest spell line because you can just turn into lightning.
Shadow magic.
Shadow magic.
So back on the Bloodthorn cult here. I know we talked about the Reachmen a little bit. And I remember there was, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago or so when the Apocrypha was still a Facebook group before it collapsed.
Apocrypha collapse.
Yeah, I kind of
just
burned it
hilarious
down.
verbiage.
Yeah, I burned it down because the main admin was a Nazi. But
Good for you.
yeah,
Good for you.
Well then.
so
similar thing
shall
happened
not
to
be
me.
named.
I can actually relate to you on that,
No.
Andrew.
We had actually back when Evan Smith was in that group in its infancy. He's one of the admins of the Elder Scrolls lore group that has like 7,000 members or whatever. He liked to host he liked to host lore chats like this one. That's where I got the idea. That's why I do these. And so we had a lore chat one time that we did that was it was about Reachman and hedge magic, and that was what we were looking at. And I recall that the Bloodthorn cult came up, and so we were kind of drawing parallels between what we see in ESO with the Bloodthorn cult and the Reachman we see in Skyrim, specifically vis-a-vis the Briarhearts, because it seems to be that the Bloodthorn cult, which leans a little more towards the necromancy. They're almost, I mean, you could classify them as like druid necromancers. They're using nature.
They're using plants.
Yeah. So they're making use of nature to the ends of creating necromancy, rather than just Manimarco's brand of, oh, you're dead, well, you're up now, and you're.
Allow me to pull up Rothgar's quest, because there's another tribe. There's another band of Reachmen that we need to understand. I believe, that's the really weird thing. I don't know if tribe or band would be the proper term here. I want to say tribe would, but I'm not sure.
I think they consider themselves clans just because they're still kind of related to Breton culture.
Yeah, I think if you're getting into that northern Tamrielic,
there's something really interesting with the Reachman in ESO.
What's that?
They did an alliance with Minotaurs.
Yes, yeah, Horns of the Reach. Yeah.
Yes, led by a direct descendant of Mori House.
A Domi House.
Yeah.
A winged Minotaur.
Yeah, I still gotta play those dungeons because I've
they're really fun.
They look neat.
Now, let me ask you, why is that strange to you?
I don't know. I've never seen an example of this happen before.
I can actually give an example of why it might be happening. They're both spurned by their parent culture. The Reachmen are spurned by the Bretons and by extension the Daggerfall Covenant, and the Minotaurs are spurned by the Imperials, as the Imperials view them as nothing more than monsters. They don't view them as descendants of Alessia and Domiaus.
Even though they're just as responsible to the construction of the Empire as
Now, let's put this into consideration. The main goal of the Daggerfall Covenant is to reestablish the Second Empire, or at least to establish a rule similar to the Second Empire. So, in other words, it is the downtrodden of the Daggerfall Covenants meeting together with the downtrodden of the Empire to fight off against the reformation of the Second Empire. And also just generally cause havoc. Because we hate people.
From Domi House dialogue, it seems he wants to become emperor himself.
Well, if he wants to follow his noble lineage from Belharza.
Yeah, he actually says that. He says that the earth is his by right, or something.
I'm looking through his dialogue now to try and find where you're saying where that's coming from.
I'm looking at it. My line is unbroken.
Yeah. Okay.
My line is unbroken.
This land knows its master. The world is my ally.
Dude, he sounds like a fucking badass.
There's a meet the character with him.
All right.
It's pretty awesome.
So I will say that my line is unbroken is would most likely be related to Morehouse. However, saying things like the world is my ally and the land knows its master doesn't necessarily mean he's talking about that in an esoteric way.
But he does. There's a...
Because here's the thing. What is he also doing consistently throughout this fight?
Summoning fire.
Controlling earth and fire both. That's the bigger thing. He could very well be meaning the earth knows its master in a literal way, in that he is a master of controlling the earth.
I don't see why.
And he has that power.
Yeah,
have you read his Meet the Character?
I mean, it feels like there's an aspect of mystical symbolism in his ability to
absolutely.
I mean, hell, he has the ability to shout, if I recall.
No, he doesn't. But he can. Let me see the line here.
What are you guys talking about?
We're talking about Dummy-House the Bloody Horned.
Yeah,
initially we were talking about the Bloodthorns, and now we've started talking about Minotaurs.
Which I'm RPing a Minotaur right now in a 5th edition game of Curse of Strahd, which is very fun. He's an Alessian Minotaur, and he got sent to Faerun.
Okay, so I found the thing that I was looking for.
Never mind.
Sorry. I found the thing that I was looking for. Frostbreak Fortress, which has a group of cults, or it has a Reachman clan there. And at Frostbreak, we get to see how exactly Briarhearts work. And it is shown that Briarhearts exist because of a unique form of growing a specific tree from dead bodies.
Yeah.
Which is dope.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, Briarhearts themselves only grow in dead bodies or something like that. Briarheart bush or something.
Not exactly. The Briarheart it requires a dead body for the tree to grow. But based on what Briarhearts look like, they look more like they're supposed to be the fruits of the Briarheart tree.
They kind of look like dragon fruit a little bit.
Yeah.
I was thinking they were more like seeds or like pine cones, maybe a bit like that. But
see, that's the weird thing, because that would mean that you'd have to be destroying the seed and preventing it from growing in order to place it within a Briarheart. And the soldier, I mean. And yeah, magic botany is great.
What about like a Nern root and sleeping tree sap with some torchbug thorax? And then with some kind of weird glowing mushroom thing.
Let's not get into that.
Is that a recipe for how to write weird shit?
Look, man, you gotta understand. Nern root only exists because Mountain has blown up more than once in history.
I never.
There is a very great lore essay about Nern root.
Yeah. Anyway, if I recall, it's because volcanic ash can be very good for soil. And apparently, Nern root does actually need volcanic ash.
Nern root does.
Yeah.
I mean, IRL. The areas around volcanoes tend to be very fertile, just because of
absolutely
mineral content, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I'm trying to think of a good example. I mean, like Hawaii. There's all kinds of volcanic soil around there.
The area around Vesuvius in Italy.
So what's
around Vesuvius in Italy, tomatoes grown there are exceptionally sweet, like compared to tomatoes grown anywhere else.
What's that, Daniel?
What's the deal with Crimson Nern root then? What type of volcano is that?
I imagine that because it can only be found in Blackreach. I would imagine it has. And I usually try to avoid bringing real world science into the Elder Scrolls just because I feel like there's
Mystic and me is fine with that. That's all the
Elder Scrolls is science fantasy. Get over it.
Well, I know, but by virtue of being a fictional world, there's no reason to assume that the Arbus works by the same physical laws that our reality does.
Well, by that logic, I would say there's no reason to assume it doesn't either.
Oh yeah,
you just gotta try it out, man.
This picture is fucking hilarious.
But the reason it would be red
those look pretty funny.
is because it needs to photosynthesize a different kind of light.
Yeah, probably.
Because it's not light coming from Magnus; it's coming from that weird orb thing. Or it's coming from
either from weird or from the ethereal
weird orb thing,
or coming from the bioluminescence. That's
coming from the weird
the
ethereal deposits that are down
sense.
there.
Yeah,
Actually, no. If those deposits are existing because they're ethereum, that wouldn't be. I'm not sure that would be bioluminescence. That would basically just be radiation.
But there's radiation. Yeah,
radiation.
That could
radiation in big quotes.
I'm talking about the mushrooms though. They give off
like
bluish purplish light.
The
magic is radiation.
Indeed, it's all floating.
No, I mean, I don't buy into the idea that Fallout is the Elder Scrolls in the future.
Well, all right.
No.
Or other way around.
Andrew, you need to take when I say radiation to put giant quotes around that because it's the very base definition of what radiation is. Let's be honest here. Magic is radiation in that it radiates from something. But then again, magic is also part of the sun.
Matt,
actually, no. At the same time, magic is also just part of science in TESS. Magic is part of everything.
It's
because it's the other way around. It's the other way around.
It seems
science is a form of magic.
No. Here's what I have
to say is that.
No, Matthias.
Matt.
What I mean.
Matthew.
All right. Matthew, what I mean when I say that magic is a part of everything, what I mean there is that even your atoms are magical.
I agree. Absolutely, I get that.
Yeah, that's the thing. In TESS, magic is not an overlay that's put on top of it like the weave in Dungeons and Dragons, or basically just about any other magical system.
I agree. Or physics or whatever.
Magic is as
Your vocals breaking up.
I could not hear like 80%.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Is it good now?
A little better, I think.
Sorry if my microphone's too loud right now. I don't know why.
I think you just have a loud voice. I just want to make sure that no one's getting drowned out.
Is my voice good to hear now?
Yeah. I turned your mic up on my end, so we'll be able to hear you a little better.
Yeah, I don't have a good mic.
That's fine.
No, but you didn't hear what I said, right, Charlie?
Correct.
I said that I agree and that I think magic in the Orbis is as primal as space and time.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I think you're both right.
Akka, Lorca, Magnus.
That magic and science are interrelated, and that magic is a fundamental part of the composition of the reality in the Elder Scrolls, just like physics is a fundamental part of our reality.
Yeah.
I'll give you the quote that made me say that. That science is a form of magic.
Okay.
Let me find it.
Now, I will, while you're looking for that, I will say why exactly I disagree with that, and why I say that studying magic is that science itself is just studying magic in TESS, and not that science is a form of magic. Is because if we go by just the definition of science, the intellectual or practical activity encompassing the systemic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. We know that when you are studying magic, you study it through observation and experiment, and you are studying the quote-unquote natural world. So in this context, I would say that like destruction magic would therefore be the science of applying your willpower to create spells that cause destruction.
Yeah. Also, here's the quote. If anyone want to read it.
Yeah, sure.
Anyone here?
Yes.
Who's reading?
Aether's ancestral seat of the 9 divines and the other original spirits is the plane of pure magica, whereas oblivion may surround us every night. It is a ethereal energy that infuses our daily existence, from highest to lowest, and gives us all the races of man, bird, and beast common purpose. Its magic brings the rain to the fields, love to our hearts, and scientific principles to our technological industries.
Yeah.
That's the one.
All right. Where is that quote from?
Pocket Guide to the Empire, 3rd edition, the part that Kirkbride wrote.
Okay.
Right.
See, even there, I'm partial to disagree with it. In that the way I've always seen it is that Mundus itself was carved just from reality. If we view Aetherius, if we view the Arbus as a whole, Aetherius, Oblivion, and Mundus is just a part carved from there. As a result, especially since this seems to be a sort of balance between Aetherius and Oblivion, you sort of get this middle ground where you have a good balance of positive and negative, of Adron and Daedron. So by having those holes that bypass Oblivion and go straight to Aetherius, everything itself is still magical, but because Aetherius is chock full of Adrons and it's pouring into the Mundus, is therefore causing a disbalance and making the Mundus more, or at least providing more magic to the Mundus, but the magic was already there in the first place.
Mm.
What about what's beyond Aetherius?
What's beyond Aetherius? I would say that's what's beyond the Arbus.
No, there is a realms beyond. No, there's stuff beyond Aetherius that's inside the Arbus.
The void?
Yeah,
No.
It's not like you talk about Sithis, though.
No, I can give you some quotes, actually, from ESO.
All right.
They mention realm.
Interesting.
Lilata, the Psychic Mage, she mentions realms beyond Aetherius, not a void beyond Aetherius.
Adjacent places, probably.
Sigix.
What's that, LJ? What'd you say?
Oh, the first part was me just saying nerds. The second part was that the part was talking about adjacent places.
Oh, okay.
Adjacent places are parallel timelines of Nerd, though.
Not necessarily. That's not really what adjacent place is. Adjacent place is basically just a outside reality / realm /
a adjacent reality. I presume they are off Mundus.
Not all of them are off Mundus.
Yeah, the Mundus itself isn't reality. It's just a part of reality.
Yeah, but the Mundus itself is compro.
Alright,
People, I really need to write how I see the Arbis.
Yes, you should.
I would read
like
that.
That would be a good idea. That actually sounds very interesting.
We could put it on Telmora.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
I wonder if I should do it from an outside universe perspective or in-universe. Because if I do in-universe, I have a get-out-of-jail-free card if I say something wrong.
That's always handy.
No, I mean, you can still have that get-out-of-jail-free card if you're doing it from a different, like an out-of-universe perspective. If you're looking at it from the perspective of a different universe, not necessarily ours, but someone else, and say,
we're still doing it in character.
Yeah, it's a character in Enron or whatever, and he notices, oh, there's this plane over here. Who was it I was talking to? Oh, yeah. I don't know. Am I allowed to talk about your coda at all, Silence?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Silence is working on this really cool mashup with Elder Scrolls and Star Wars.
What?
Interesting.
Yeah.
You should read.
Are there Jedi?
Did you know there's a Okay, you're gonna get into Star Wars here. What Star Wars? Legends or Disney? I assume Legends.
Probably current canon.
What?
Probably the current canon, because that's what I'm much more familiar with.
Oh, okay.
And so there's this bit where so I think that they're like some kind of rebels or something. They approach this thing that's kind of spherical, and before that's no moon. And they get basically absorbed into it, and well, I don't really know a whole lot of the details. I read what was there, and
I can share what I've got so far if you guys want, but
Star Wars metaphysics.
yeah,
That's a thing.
That's all Force stuff.
My point is you could take a standpoint from a different franchise practically, and just write the observations of what the Arbus is from the standpoint of a different universe. Because I'm fully on board with the idea that every fantasy or any fictional franchise that we have ever.
So Stephen King,
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
the Dark Tower.
Yeah, anything could be another dream. Along the same lines that Tess is part of the same dream. I suppose, except for those that have their own metaphysics that excludes that. I guess. Unless that's just a different method of dreaming. I don't know. I mean, it would have to be a case. But,
whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, I mean, there could be another dream, 8 dreams down the line. Oh, that's Middle Earth. And, you've got a lot of similar themes because a lot of ideas get translated from one mind to the next. But
it's weird and start talking about Bloodborne then.
Yeah.
There is something I want to write that has to be in character.
What's that?
It's going to be a Dunmer scholar from the time of ESO traveling to the Somerset Isles. And he will be commenting on Altmeri culture and religion and how the Dunmer are much better than them.
Yeah, I can see exactly why Dunmer would be saying that.
There was someone who's in the Dreamsleep group who interviewed me, like we did an in-character interview.
Those are fun.
And I'm trying to remember who it was, but he was asking questions about. Gotta find it. He was asking questions about like the Altmer point of view and things. And my main RP character, he's a Dunmer, and he was saucy the whole time, just a snarky bitch. And it was
asshole. How long ago was this? Was it Logan that did it with the Black Horse Courier?
No.
I remember he interviewed a lot of pages.
This is I don't know, couple months ago, maybe. Sorry, I'm laughing at something totally unrelated.
Well, Andrew.
Yo.
Speaking of that weird sun orb in Blackreach, that feeds into my Snowthroat idea I was talking about.
Oh yeah.
A couple weeks ago. Yeah. Because.
Elaborate.
Okay, so for all of you just now joining us, this was a story. This back when we were talking about miscellaneous murder and one of the Selectus Lorecasts, and so of course we talked about the snow elves and shit. And for the longest, for like 5 years, since like 2014, I've been the staunch advocator of that the stone of Snowthroat is the sun, because I like to link up.
I think it's the. I think it's the Copic cycle, maybe.
I wouldn't
sun
go
can
that
be a lot
far.
of things, but
there is a text in ESO that mentions a stone that in Skyrim that can lead to Aetherius. They use stone in capital leather.
But part of
It's
this.
not just Azora's Star.
No, it's a Ysmir the Forefather, Volume 4. It's a really good text.
Well, the reason why I came up with this theory was because the first part was that MK, when he made that list of towers, with the towers and their stones a while back, he said stone of Snowfro was a cave.
Yeah.
And then he later elaborated on that it was Plato's cave.
Did he say that it was Plato's cave outright? Because I remember.
Yeah, he did in like a Facebook PM.
Well, it was more like someone suggested, "Oh, is it Plato's cave?"
And he like, "Yup."
And he was like, "Yup." So he didn't outright say it; he just affirmed it.
If you are speaking of the,
I guess I'm splitting hairs, but
it was probably a metaphysical affirmation.
Hold up. If we are speaking of the Stone of Snowthroat, there is a text that we absolutely should read. This one that I just mentioned before.
I've already read it. That's why I was talking about. But the reason why, because it's the Stone Snowfro described as being half there, and for me, after reading Ysmir the Forefather, reading what some notes that MK's left behind and talking to him, and talking to Chris, Francis, and a bunch of other people, I came to the conclusion about it's the sun because the sun's half there. It's in the morning, during the day. It's gone during the night. It's literally a hole in the sky, and it's technically a cave in the literal sense because it leads somewhere else and it's basically like a tunnel. And which makes it even better is that the snow, like you have Adamantian Tower, which is connected to Akatosh in time. You have Lorcon, which is connected to the rest to
So you think it's connected to Magnus?
Yeah. Well, my personal theory, which is kind of a little bit, it's kind of talked about a little bit in ESL and a couple other Ascurd texts, but basically, my theory is that Snowthroat was basically Magnus's launch pad when he jumped out.
Yeah, I heard that. It's kind of fun.
It into Aetherius when he ripped a hole in the sky. So basically,
and he cut himself during the hole.
Yeah, Snowthroat.
And Dagon came down.
Not that you're getting too far ahead on that one.
No, yeah, no, but this line here. Can I read it? This text, a part of it at least.
Go ahead.
Sure. Okay. From among his stains and housecarls, a young man no more than a boy, whom none of them has seen before, then dared to speak. Bowing low, he said, "Then do not go anywhere on Nirn, but go to the sky, where you can watch over all your peoples." Ysmir, king of men and dragons, liked this idea. He said, "But boy, how would I reach the sky? Is there a mountain or a ladder built by men that can reach so high?" And the boy said, "There is no such thing, neither mountain nor ladder nor staircase. But I know of one place, a single stone. This is the path to Aetherius." And Ysmir summoned all of his champions and housecarls and told them how he was intent to end his life by ascending to the sky, and all of them, everyone, agreed to follow him to the place where the boy led. And when they reached... What?
That sounds like Alien.
I was saying hi to Astra.
Hello.
Hey, Astra.
Hello.
Hello. Late as usual.
You think it sounds alien?
I do. At least in
I agree. It does sound like something
application.
Alien, the Welkin stones and stuff.
Maybe not like Alien written, but Alien observed.
Maybe. Or maybe Falmer. I don't know.
The stone could also just be the throat of the world.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. The Stone of Snowthroat. When in Skyrim, when Sun sends you back from Sovngarde, where do you land? At Snowthroat.
That's the stone.
Yeah, that's like what makes the most sense.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for not talking. I
don't see why it would be alien if, considering the whole text is Nordic myth.
Well, just the whole raising into the sky thing, and like towers.
It's very Magnus-like.
Magnus-like.
And the text goes to say that Ysmir becomes the warrior constellation, so it is very Magnus-like.
Ysmir becomes the warrior constellation.
Yeah. According to this text,
looked up into the heavens and saw their king, the great warrior, riding across the sky.
Weird.
Huh.
I only say that's weird because we have. I only say that's weird because Craglorn.
Yeah, and there's a Lore Master's archives where I don't know which character he was playing is, but she argues that this myth is a metaphor. That he ascended to Aetherius through the warrior constellation instead.
Mm.
Which makes more sense.
Positioning of the throw and the constellation at the time.
Probably.
And it wouldn't be the first time we've had contradicting
myths.
lore. Yeah.
I mean, Nordic mythology is a clusterfuck.
Yeah.
Intentionally so.
Only Nordic?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, only Nordic, clearly.
Merethic myth is just perfect. You can't,
it's incredibly straightforward, don't you know?
Don't even get started on the Dunmer.
Oh, you mean the most straightforward? that reminds me.
No, but I mean in the sense that Nords just say whatever makes a cool story at drinking time.
Yeah. So they'd be notorious liars, therefore.
They do got the Bards College up there. They like their stories.
Yeah.
I do like these two lines, though.
No. So I will say, in regards to talking about Nords and elves and beasts and Varla stones and whatnot, that reminds me that I had sent Andrew a great deal of information earlier this week. I believe it was on Thursday, I think. My interpretation of how exactly the different races fall into Anu's interpretation and what their existence and where they are represents.
Anu.
It's interesting.
So one of the thoughts in particular, we know that Mer are incredibly Anuic. They, in terms of the mortal races, they represent Anu.
Depends on which Mer.
I'd say all of them.
Dunmer.
Yes, still. They still came from Anuic origins.
Yeah, but they rejected it.
Well, it's still a process.
Yeah. It's still a process, and it's still part of Anu. So allow me to actually continue.
Okay, sorry.
So, nah, sorry, I didn't mean to say it like that. Anyway, so for instance, we know that all the Mer come from Anuic origins. If we think about the concept of north is east, south is west, east is future, west is past. When you look at the Altmer, and by extension the Altmer as well, they're in the southwest most of Tamriel. They are in effectively the most past. My thought therein is that what the Altmer are supposed to represent, with a lot of the time that the Altmer are very much not the most willing to change. They can change, but they are not the most willing to change.
Yeah.
They represent, if we take the model of Anu's dream being Anu coming to grips with who they are, the Altmer represents Anu prior to Nerni getting killed. It is a desire to go back and be at that time before the death of Nur. By extension, when you look at the other elves, when you look at the other Mer, each of them is going either to the north or to the west, with a key exception being the Malmer. The Malmer being incredibly off base and going south and east at the same time. So they're going forward and stepping back at the same time and just sort of stumbling over themselves. The Bosmer in this context would be they are only going east, and as a result, because they're only going east and not going north, they're just trying to move forward. They're trying to just ignore what had happened and try to just go with the flow. So you start getting this sort of nature vibe from them.
I like the Bosmer.
The Dureni only went north. They became a lot more logical with what they were doing. If we assume that east is pure progression and north is mental progression. So because the Dureni had only gone north and they met with the needs, if we assume that the Manish races are supposed to be the most Padomaic and therefore represent Padome killing Nur, then pure mental progression without forward progression, without allowing that sort of pain to seep in and take hold, would basically be Anu trying to convince someone like Padome of their ideology, of their worldview, to try and explain their worldview to them. So you have the interaction between the Dureni and the needs. And as a result, because of that interaction, you have the need to become the Bretons, who are much more tolerant of the elves. Because through Anu's interpretation, if he could just talk with them, they would be more accepting, they'd be more understanding. Then you have the Aliens, where it's east and north, but just not far enough. So you have more mental progression, but you've also allowed that sort of pain to seep in. You've allowed it to go on inside of you. So you have an interpretation of Anu's anger, of wanting to lash out against what they had felt.
That's really interesting.
And then, of course, the Dunmer are the most east and the most north. And as a direct result of that, they are the absolute extreme of both.
That's a cool conspiracy theory.
And at the same time, it also kind of extends in the thought of, like, again, taking the whole future past concept, the Red Guards, by that extent, being a race of men from the far west, pretty much just represents Anu's fear of what has already happened. And fear of it happening again, which we see happening when the Red Guards arrive in the Deadlands, and the moment they see people with pointed ears, they launch a full-scale invasion.
Yeah.
The Nords, on the other hand, seem to represent this concept of they are from the future, but they are from a future where people like Anu don't exist. And I don't mean literal future. What I more mean is they represent the idea of Anu meeting with people who have never seen anyone like them. And so when the Nords start landing, or when the Atmorans rather start landing on Skyrim, and you start having the Falmer who are becoming very cautious and worried about Atmorans showing up, through the eyes of the Atmorans, they were thinking, why are you cautious and worried? What's wrong? Like, we've done nothing wrong to you. But the Falmers still have those memories. They still have those feelings of, oh God, it's going to happen again. And as a result, because they're as far east as the Aliens, so they're becoming more emotional, and they're as far north as the Dureni, and thinking of things in a lot more drawn-out way, they immediately have that emotion clashing with them thinking of things in a drawn-out way, and all they can think of is, oh God, if this keeps happening, then we're fucked. Because they're thinking too far ahead, but they're thinking negatively too far ahead. And as a result, they lash out unprovoked, which, of course, leads to them getting fucked.
It's funny because the very text I linked before talked about north and past and south as in relation to time, sorta.
I mean, that text basically takes pretty much something that me, MK, Chris,
Your mic's really quiet.
about.
My own mic?
No.
LJ's.
No, LJ's.
I have a natural, very deep voice, and I am always irritated, so I'm going to be very quiet.
Yeah.
Apologies.
LJ's voice is always quiet. It's just who he is.
No, but yeah, this text talks about the continents and does some nice descriptions of them.
By the way, from the extension of this we can also draw from this two things from this wonderful conspiracy theory. A, races of men who have interactions with elves early on in their development are therefore become more tolerant of elves later on, compared to races of men that have already developed far enough to the point where that when they meet elves, they are either immediately hostile or indifferent before becoming hostile. C, Bretons and Imperials both having interactions with elves early on in their development, and even the Searods who were enslaved for about 1,000 years and treated very horribly by the aliens, still ultimately end up becoming a lot more tolerant towards elves than both the Red Guards and the Atmoran Nords. All of this also represents a different thing. The Khajiit are representative of Nur, in that they're just sort of a middle ground accepting of everybody. But then I would argue that the Argonians as a race only exist because of the Hist, and in this context, the Hist represent the idea of culture at large, of society influencing you even when you don't want it to. Because the Hist are pure outside influence coming in and affecting things that Anu would otherwise not want them to affect.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Like,
I was going to say a thing about the history being
the thing
influence.
like the Argonians,
aliens.
Yeah, well, in this context, yes, they would be aliens. In what I mean in terms of the metaphor is that the Hist themselves are the influence of society, of what society says should and should not be, and thus, even when you try and prevent it from taking root, it can still take root.
The external force shaping Mundus in a conflict.
Got him.
They're the external force shaping Mundus, but because Anu does not want them to do that, they can only shape so much. Hence, they're shaping lizards. And if you believe some other theories, also birds. But that's something.
Birds mean the aliens there.
No, it does not mean the aliens. It means there were actually bird people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the idea of, if we were to take the concept that the birdmen of Cyrodiil were indeed literal bird people, there are theories that I think hackwings or similar birds. There are theories that state that Hiss farther north in Black Marsh may have been experimenting on birds rather than lizards, and also creating a race.
Isn't there a history in Skyrim, sorta?
I don't remember if the sleeping tree is a history.
That's a theory. That's a conspiracy.
It's never been. What
Isn't it
about
supposed to
the
be one of
Gota
the
Green?
It's not
or whatever
really
that one tree.
I mean, there's cousins to the Hist in Umbriel. So, in Oblivion.
Yeah, I thought the sleeping tree was supposed to be one of the Hists that fell.
I would say anything related to the history is. I mean, especially in like Umbriel's case, it could just be a way to recycle souls.
Umbriel is fascinating,
and I think that actually happened in Umbriel. Come to think of it,
it's a self-contained, recycling self-sustaining system.
Yeah,
the whole mountain is one.
I think it's very difficult. It's very difficult for us to like have any solid answers with the Hist because
they're intended to be mysterious.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
Shrouded in void.
Even in ESO, where they have actual dialogue with you, it's very vague.
laughs in the warden.
I was going to ask a question when we were talking about the future, past, and present, and even though a lot of that is a metaphorical or a metaphor, is there do time zones exist in?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
What
is
time
Tamriel big enough to have a time zone?
I
would imagine so.
I would hope so.
And if there are, do people have knowledge of it? Do people understand it?
Here's a better question. Do people have clocks? I would argue that they should because the term clock.
The Dwemer have clocks.
Clock and timepieces exist.
Yeah. But as far as, I mean, are you talking about time zones the way we have time
there is
zones?
a clock. There is
I mean,
a
I'd
clock
imagine
you
that'd be
can-
different. I'd imagine if they did exist, it would be different because everything is different.
There is a
Everything
clock
is
that
different
you
and
can
weird.
find in Somerset that has a model
Oh,
of,
yeah.
the Mundus.
Yes, yes. I built one.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it took me a long time to get that blueprint. Tell you what.
It's a pretty awesome clock.
Yeah, dude, it's actually really sweet. It's right next to my my jewelry table, actually. Anyway, I mean, if we assume that it's time zones in the way that we have them here,
no,
I would guess no. And not because of any size that Tamriel may or may not be, but more because of the structure of the Arbus itself.
Nern.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well,
and Nern, yeah.
I don't think Nern is anything like a planet in our own universe.
Yeah, it's not. It's bizarre.
You only see
the oceans are made of time, and
the oceans are made of memory.
And time.
Time is
both.
memory.
The oceans have more than 3 dimensions to them. And they have transliminal tones and shit. It's all very wacky. I don't even think... Nern is probably not a globe.
Well,
but it's also not...
we see it as a globe. When we see planes as a globe, more because that's the only way our brains can actually
Hold on. Nern is not infinite.
I'm not saying Nern is... I'm not saying Nern is infinite.
I can only respond to one thing at a time here. Nern is not infinite, and so the spheric the whole thing about how infinite planes show up as spheres because the mortal mind can't comprehend infinity, that doesn't necessarily apply to Nern.
Yeah, but that's talking about higher dimensional space or higher dimensional constructs. I would argue that the planes have more than 3 spatial dimensions. And since we are mortals, we can only see in 3. So when we are looking at the planes, we are only seeing that cross-section of it. That which is the sphere. Not the whole scope of it. And while I agree that Nern isn't infinite, I think that Nern isn't 3-dimensional either. And if you agree it helps a lot to explain how each continent can be in a different point in time.
That does actually make sense, yeah.
Well, and sorry, I was enjoying my drink. Were you suggesting that the other continents are not different points in time?
I was saying that they are.
Okay.
And the reason that makes sense is because Nern has more than 3 dimensions.
Yes.
When you go east through the sea, you're not just going east. You're going through higher dimensional space, the ocean, and ending up in a different point in time.
Which I'm in.
Okay, let's not go into that.
I actually I disagree with that at a fundamental level with the higher dimensional bit, but that's because of my own headcanons on the structure of the Arbus and Nern.
I mean, yeah, okay, that's everyone can think whatever they want.
Yeah, I
just,
mean, I
go on.
But I guess the basis is still the same. The Akavir is the future, Yokuda is the past.
And Atmora is frozen, and Aldemaris is the reverse.
Yeah, Aldemaris doesn't really exist in the first place.
Speaking of that, from the Izmir book I quoted before, there's a very funny line that talks about that, about the continents. It goes like this. Go east where the ocean touches the sky. Go west where the sun kisses the earth. North to the very frozen tips of Nirn. South to the pillars of smoke and fire. This is talking about Akavir, Yokuda, Atmora, and I would argue Aldemaris.
It only mentioned 4 though, right? So that could just be Tamriel.
No, but
idea.
The characters are in Tamriel when they say this.
I actually have a bit of an idea regarding Aldemaris and this fact that no one can actually find it. And it's not the idea of, Aldemaris never actually existed anyway. It's just the whole idea
existed in the Dawn era.
That golden age, that long lost time, when in reality that long lost time may have never existed. My argument here, if we assume that metaphor plays the absolute biggest role in test, which in a lot of cases, it plays the biggest role.
Adorn ideas.
What I would say is,
people argue with me about that, about metaphors and shit.
Manifest metaphors.
If it's metaphor, then you can't you can take it as metaphor and as a literal thing.
Yeah. So
I'm going me, by the way.
So my thought there.
Yeah, I find that like with anything, we can. If you believe an idea enough, it manifests itself. It creates itself, and and it's not saying that it did or did not exist, but in the minds of many Mer, it does exist. Therefore, it exists.
Yeah. So, all right. So here's the thing with Aldemaris. Before I lose my train of thought, my thought therein is that the reason it cannot be found is because when convention had ended and the Aldmer had sailed off to Somerset and whatnot, or the last of the Aldmer had sailed off to Somerset, it was then at that point that deep down you start to believe, all right, the land is lost. Because already with mortality becoming a thing that exists, you already start to have the feeling of, oh god, everything is falling apart, everything is lost. So in this context, Aldemaris does still exist. It's somewhere out there, but you cannot find it because there's a deep-seated belief that it is lost. Therefore, it will remain lost. It's not going to be until someone who believes firmly enough that it is not lost that you could then find Aldemaris. And in terms of physical location, it's likely that the belief of it being lost causes Aldemaris to change where it physically is. Hence why any previous thoughts of where it was are no longer true.
Can I link a MK comment about the continents? Just to throw a wrench at this?
Sure.
From the old Betsoft forums, even. There's a very weird stuff thing in there. Also, MK being banned.
Yeah,
It happens.
Well, he wasn't banned because of something he did. He actually asked to be banned because he knew he.
But this isn't Tesla. This is the old Betsoft forum.
Oh, those forums. Okay, I thought you were talking about Tesla. So I'm like doing other things at the same time.
Aldemaris wasn't a place; it was an idea. Atmora wasn't a place; it was an idea. And Yokuda exists in the literal past, and Akavir exists in the literal future. This is where I get weird.
And Master Lig Shadow and Lig is a coffee stain.
Yep. What the fuck is that?
Lig is a coffee stain.
Yeah, it is.
But how is Master a Shadow of Lig?
Now see, alright, again, the whole thing of like like I do love this post. It is great. But then this also plays into in-universe thoughts of Imperial scholars who consistently assert that Aldmeris never existed in the first place, but then they also rapidly assert that Atmora existed.
Yeah, see, and I've been of the mind in the past that Atmora also does not exist, but I've been met with more.
You've been met with more vitriol about that.
Yeah, more
MK
resistance.
agrees with you, actually. MK
Well, yeah,
agrees with you.
Because in my mind, if
Also,
Aldmeris,
hello, new person, Tiffany.
Hey,
hello.
Hi.
As soon as we finish this train of thought, we will put you on the spot. So
it's okay. I was in your position last time.
Okay,
right,
so
returning to
if
Atmora.
hold on, Charlie. So if Aldmeris is the collective memory of a time when the Mer were unified in Dawn, it's their idea of what timelessness of the Dawn is, right? They see it as infinite opportunity, and they can be immortal and timeless, and they can exist forever because there's no time to exist in. They're by default always there. But then men, by way of this dichotomy, they see timelessness, the dawn, as death. It's if I exist all the time, it's the same as not existing at all. And so Atmora is their idea of the dawn, of what happens when we go back to that time where there is no time at all to be in.
So are you saying that men are a half glass empty?
Yeah. They're a bit pessimistic about it. I mean, where the elves see a good thing in the dawn. They see their return as spirits of the ether that live forever, and they never die or whatever.
Oh God, the men are emo then. They want to die. They don't want to live forever.
When I was a young boy, my father took me to the city. See, I'm marching band.
When I was a young boy, my father beat me with jumper cables.
I thought he was going in that direction.
No. I was no. That was my high school experience. Pretty much was My Chemical Romance and Fall Out Boy.
Yep.
But anyway, so Tiffany, hi.
Yeah, hi.
So
hello.
You're new to us.
Yes.
And so what we like to do, have you ever watched any of our lore chats before?
No, I've dropped in for a couple minutes here and there, but usually you guys are doing this. It doesn't always mesh with my kids' schedule, so
gotcha. Okay.
But have you listened to it then outside?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I've been really bad about that.
So that's all right.
Don't worry, I'm horrible about it too.
It's casual for a reason.
Watch them occasionally.
Perfect.
So what we like to do is whenever we have people we've never really had before in a discourse kind of way, you're here now, you're engaged, you're with us. We like to ask these new folks, what would you like to know about? What would you like to discuss? Because as I mean, most of us here are pretty well versed in the lore.
I mean, I like to pretend I am.
Okay.
So what do you want to talk about?
Oh, good question. I don't know. I'm just starting to brush up on lore and stuff. Like, I've been a fan of the series, oh my gosh, since like Oblivion.
Okay.
But I just started, and I mean, I logged like a couple thousand hours into Skyrim, but it's only in the last year or so that I've like really started digging deep.
Mm-hmm.
You are, I am the same.
Yeah.
That's basically how I
got
started as well.
I
It's
got
weird.
into the lore on January last year.
Yeah, you get sucked into that lore hole and you just...
Yeah, it was great. It was great. It's great.
Yeah.
I'm more like
it's like, how can I be a fan of something for so long and yet like barely scratch the surface of it?
Yes.
And then there's me.
The planets are gods.
It's tantalizing, isn't it? Where you see this.
Oh yeah.
There's this pit in front of you, There you go. How deep am I willing to go? If you stare into the abyss stares back into you.
Yes.
Now,
The
see,
best,
on the other
you know,
hand, be
the best
happy or
part
not
about
me.
getting into Test lore. The best part is then going back to the games and starting to see everything from another perspective.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Like, I know exactly what you mean. Like, I started playing what do you call it, Morrowind, and then I went back to the Dragonborn expansion, and I'm tying in all of this knowledge that I've like.
Sharmat.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah. Miraka's Sharmat is one of my favorite things. That might just be because it's proximity with Hermaeus Mora, and he's my favorite prince. But
speaking of that sort of thing,
he's your favorite because you're weird.
I was explaining.
I am equally as weird then.
I was explaining Elder Scrolls cosmology to a friend of mine who plays Skyrim, and then someday he came to me and said that because of you, now every time I look up in the sky at night during Skyrim, all I can think of is that's a dead body.
Yeah.
Well, he's not wrong.
Now, see,
talk
then there's
about
the
a positive
weird...
association.
See, then there's the weird thing of the thought of the moons are not Lorcan's dead body. Lorcan's dead body is a third moon that we rarely get to see.
Yeah, Lorcage.
Yeah. By the way, Tiffany, be happy you're not me, because mine was less like a pit and more like a crevasse that I fell in like 2013. And every time I try and get out, it's a crevasse. I can't get out. It's deeper.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I'm still falling.
Get out,
Yeah.
back in.
I've recently very much got into Arimatheus's podcast.
Oh, he's got good stuff.
So, and it's like it's everything you think you knew everything until you like go back to the basics of like just the structure.
I've been listening to his podcast. I've been listening to his podcast, waiting for him to say something that I disagree with. I told him as such, and he's like, I don't know how I feel about that. And
that's pretty confrontational.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, because it's not out of confrontation. It's out of the joy of discussion. I want to be. Oh, maybe. I like to be. I mean, in the moment, I may not like it, but in a general sense, I like to be proven wrong because it means I'm learning.
Yes, exactly.
And
I
so
really like how he frames it as like a two-way conversation. Like, you know, he may be completely wrong. You know, there are multiple different people who believe different things, and he tries to include both sides of those kind of.
And that's something that I'm working on doing also. I get a lot of shit in test lore because I have this bad habit of presenting my accepted headcanons or you know general consensus kind of stuff, and I present it as fact. I don't have sources. This is just what we all understand. This is what we.
Why I like Aramithius. All of his stuff is based on sources.
Yeah,
so I respect that.
I got called today an abomination because I taught in test lore. As I told someone I'm really good at collecting information and like assimilating all into one nugget, but I'm really bad at knowing where all this information came from. And part of that may be because I don't really care what the source is. If I like it and it makes sense, I'm gonna accept it. Like that's
until you find something that like conflicts with it, or how do you marry those two things?
Changes everything.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it becomes a matter of what makes more sense? What do I like more? Because see, my whole thing with fiction, especially the Elder Scrolls, is every one of us has another version of the Elder Scrolls in our heads, and everyone who's been introduced to the series, they have their own idea of what this world is, and no matter who says what about it, that's their interpretation, and it cannot be wrong, fundamentally.
To quote Chic, a parting Chic, the lore is yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, God
no.
bless the man. God bless the man. He full-on man crush. Schick is my homeboy.
Schick told us that the lore is ours. UESP responded,
Yeah.
"No?" Question mark.
And he's good.
What?
Oh, whoops.
Whoopsie.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, I guess I'm in charge now.
5 on accident with my thumb.
One of the USP's great lies.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm really excited because Schick is gonna mail me.
UESP was attacking you, Andrew, for spreading his lies.
Fuck you, ASP. I'm so over that shit. Wikia for life, man.
I made a parody of the truthing sequence, but changed it so it was talking about canon and USP.
Oh yeah. The Truth in Sequence is great. I'm pretty sure Schick wrote that.
No, it wasn't Dean or the other guy. Or
well, it was either him or Lehman Tuttle. Yeah. Which God, I hope he gets that position. Because I wanna PM that guy and be like, dude, let me interview you. And then that's gonna be great. So anyway, you asked how I marry those two.
Yeah.
I mean sometimes it's someone tries to convince me and I resist the hell out of it. And they're like, no, here's a fact, here's a source, here's this and that and the other thing. I'm like, no. And I'll just resist it, and it'll escalate. And we Dove have terrible voices, and what looks like a fight is actually just a friendly debate. And
you'll keep resisting the truth until eventually, eventually the universe determines that you're now a metaphor for an aardvark.
Well, no. So then, as it dies out, then after the fact, I'm no longer in the conversation. Conversation's dead. Okay, yeah, no, you might be right. That's kind of how that usually works for me.
Okay.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. I didn't mean aardvark. I meant screaming hairy armadillo. Which is not to say that you are hairy, but it is to say that there is a breed of armadillo called screaming hairy armadillo.
I'm hairy. You just can't see it.
For those wondering in the chat, here's a video.
Oh dear.
I want to see.
Andrew.
Yeah.
Andrew, here's the parody of the
kinds of things.
truthing sequence I wrote.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
You got a parody?
Look at this screamy baby.
I can't see. What? I don't know jack about phones. What the heck?
It's this thing I wrote.
Hungry. I love it.
Oh god, that is hideous.
I seriously can't. Yeah, I can't see. I'm gonna take your word for it.
Oh god, it is both degrees of reaction to that. Oh, look at this little baby. Oh god, it's hideous.
2 cats, 2 times people.
Nicely done, Matt. Nicely done. I've been challenged by the other mods of Test Lore not to use the word canon.
Oh, it's true.
Because
Canon? What's that?
The idea is that the more that we freak out about keeping things open to subjectivity, the more we get resisted on it.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be canon arguments. Like, we can't do anything about it. People aren't going to change. That's we're tribalistic.
Exactly the same as how there's always going to be people trying to start a fight by saying, who's going to win the Civil War?
Oh god! See,
when in reality,
I'm at the point where I almost fucking I nuke those outright. Like, no.
Yes, seriously.
Wait, dude, like this turns into someone's gonna call someone else a racist, and then it all goes downhill from there.
Someone might actually be racist. It's a whole weird thing.
See, and that's not my bag, man. I just don't want that shit in my fucking sub. Like,
yeah. I just posted something there.
Have your arguments in private. I'm not interested. This meat is actually not half bad.
This video I posted represents the people who care about canon in my mind.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No. See, I'm one barley wine in, and now I moved on to mead. So it's
I'm thinking I might go make myself some coffee.
Oh yeah, I've seen this video.
Okay, I'll be right back. I'm gonna make some coffee.
I can't see it. I'm sorry.
This is getting better and better with every passing moment.
It's the best video.
Yeah. So anyway, what else do you want to talk about, Tiffany?
Oh, I have.
Oh God.
Name a topic. What do you?
Tiffany, we're putting you on the spot.
What are you curious about? What's
my God! I've got a whole book of things that I'm curious about.
Okay.
Chapter 1.
Or well, actually, I know I have 1 page of things that I'm curious about. I've been like taking notes, which is something that I haven't done with books and literature and media in general. I haven't done that on my own ever.
That's how you do it. You've got a lore stubble going on there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's becoming a problem, but it's a I want to know more about how I mean, this is just random. I want to know more about how the Telvanni towers are grown, because something that was said in Solstheim piqued my interest about how they are fed blood and what? I like that. There's like a myrrh buried at the bottom of every tower or something.
That sounds like ignorant fear mongering to me. Yeah. In Morrowind, you're given the opportunity to grow your own Telvanni.
Okay. Okay.
And so what happens
That's
is
awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's fucking cool. So you talk to this lady in the Telmora council hall or whatever, and she says, "Okay, you need to get me some good, some materials here." And one of the materials she asks for, she says, "I need." She actually gives you a soul gem. It's a grand soul gem. She says, "You need to get me the soul of a storm atronach. Go get that. Bring it back to me. I'll start on your house." So you go out.
Storm atronach, you say?
Yep, might have been a winged twilight. I don't remember. Well, one of the two.
If it is a storm atronach, this is very interesting.
Why is that?
Because in Isle of Madness, the latest Elder Scrolls Legend expansion, the characters go to a Telvanni tower, and they channel the magical energies of the tower to summon a blizzard over a region of Morrowind. So that would make sense if it is Storm Atronach.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this is in Tel Uvirith, so I don't know if different kinds of souls produce different kinds of architecture or what.
Okay.
But I know you're told to get a specific kind of soul. I'm pretty sure it's a Storm Atronach. Pretty sure. And so you go and you bring it back to her, and over the course of about a week in game, you can watch your tower grow. So basically what she does is she plants this soul gem, probably alongside some kind of fungal spore or something. And it starts as this little like bud-shaped nubbin that kind of shows up in the ground there.
That's a button mushroom.
Yeah, so you can't go into it. It's it's about the size of a person. Like it's there. And then 3 days later, you've got here's a pod that you can go into. It's got a door and everything, and you can go in and you can move shit around or whatever. And then I think there's another quest you got to go do, and then eventually it grows a little more. And suddenly you've got 2 floors. You've got there's one of those tubes you got to levitate up to get to the upper floors. And eventually you've got this giant Telvanni Tower, and it's got a couple other houses off to the side. And you've got like a Dwemer and a Homunculi guards, which are kind of cool. And
I love that.
Yeah, so the idea is basically they're fungus that's somehow supercharged by the animus contained within the soul gem.
Okay, so I mean, I do a little bit of like mushroom collecting in my spare time, and there's different types of mushroom that grow on different substrates. Yeah. So like some of them like will eat like leaf litter or wood, or they'll only grow on a certain type or in, symbiosis with another thing.
Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's some neat stuff. There's I'm just wondering what the method of action behind that is. Like,
yeah, and if you want to see more, let me see if I can pull up because that's Tel Uvirith is the name of your personal Telvanni Tower, and it's right in the middle of the Mulligamur region, so it's in like the Ashlands pretty much. It's not in Zephyrbal Bay like a lot of the others, and so here's the link I just put in chat. Tel Uvirith is a Telvanni settlement in the Mulligamur region located on the site of Uvirith's grave. House Telvanni defends the settlement as their commissioned stronghold, although House Rudder and House Hilalu do not think it likewise. Tel Uvirith is the one and only Telvanni stronghold with Dwemer Centurions guarding it. In comparison to the other two strongholds accessible to the game, Tel Uvirith fully demonstrates the arrogant expansionism of House Telvanni. That's interesting.
That sounds pretty accurate.
The Elder Scrolls Wiki for making.
While in Daras Manor, the Redoran stronghold is located on the site of Bal Isra, right between Aldrun and Margon, thus in the Redoran heartland. And Reithan Manor, the Hilalu stronghold, is on the Odai Plateau just south of Balmora, also in the heartland of its house. Tel Uvirith is a direct expansion into territory which has had no affiliation with Telvanni. Tel Uvirith is notably much larger than the two other strongholds, although it is far more remote. It sports both a larger interior and more NPC accommodation in the immediate area, although it is the least populated stronghold.
Okay.
Yeah, I've done this quest a few times, and it's really cool. Because it's in the Telvanni quest line. So if you join House Telvanni,
why wouldn't you?
Yeah, you get the cooler house out of it if you do. Let's see,
you can hang out with the mages.
Yeah, let's
mages
see.
are fun.
Mago.
I'm currently playing through Hilalu.
Yeah, general quests and information. Yeah, so the gal you talk to, her name is Lunella Hilaran of the Telvanni Council House, and she's actually in the basement. And I remember you got to walk across like this kind of perilous like rock bridge to get to her. Okay, yeah, you got to get a construction contract from the Duke, Vedum Dren, brother to Orvis Dren, who is one of the counselors of House Hilalu. I always kill him. Yeah, and then she wants souls. After a few days, talk to Lunella again, who will ask you to check on the stronghold progress. You talk to the foreman at Uvirith's grave, who's an orc named Gashnag Gramughol.
They have the best names.
Yeah, orc names are always great. You return to Lunella.
There's an orc book.
What's that?
There's an orc book in ESO. That's the best lore ever.
Oh boy. Is it the 101 uses patrol fat?
No, it's hilarious. It's like something from 40K.
Oh no.
Here.
I was half expecting ABCs for barbarians.
It's in that thing.
Urbeck the wordsmith.
I actually printed a copy of ABCs for Barbarians. Where is
Oh my god, yes.
Awesome.
Where's my box? Let me see.
Oh my god!
I've got a box of. Oh yeah, there's my box.
A box of goodies.
Yes, and it's
Word
covered
I
in
hope this book into joy
It's-
reader and confidence.
It's covered in shit because, of course, it is. Okay, that needs to not be where
I
it
love
is.
that the book is a hardbound edition.
There we go. Oh, my box.
Presumably, they expect the book to be used to
There we
smash
go.
things.
So here's my box.
Oh my god.
Oh my
Nice.
goodness.
What a
This is-
nerd.
This is beautiful.
My wife had this made for me.
Oh my gosh, that's so nice.
That's cute.
And so inside, so I run a D&D 3.5 Elder Scrolls game. And when I worked in a print shop, it was really easy for me to make little prop replicas of in-game books. Here's Honor Among Thieves. And you open it up.
Very nice.
Hey, there's the actual book. Hey, that's cool. I've got all kinds of books. ABCs for Barbarians is one of them. I've also got a I've got an assassination contract from
Heck yeah.
from the Moritong.
That's a dangerous thing.
Well, I take my shit very seriously.
Good.
Um,
The club.
I also created scrolls for like spells too. So I think this one invokes the name of Molag Bal. I'm pretty sure it's a summoning spell.
Oh, that's not a good idea.
Oh boy. Good luck with that one.
Let's see. In the name of Molag Bal, I summon thee from Cold Harbor. I think it's a Dremora.
Oh, why would you use Molag Bal?
Dremora Kinval. Yeah, it's a summon a Dremora Kinval.
Can we talk about how Molag Bal managed to
here's that-
technically create something new?
Here's a Dwemeri scroll. Oops.
Ooh.
What's that one do?
This
cool.
one, I think this is summon Dwemer Centurion.
Oh
I
no,
can't-
my game crashed.
I can't read the Dwemer script, but I
like 5 of them.
yeah
I can probably
Thank
read
fuck it didn't
grammar
crash.
scripts.
well I
You
added
gotta give it some
I
time.
added a mechanic in my game where spells are actually dependent upon language, and so if
Ooh,
you've got a
careful with
Nord
that.
if you've got a Nord wizard fighting a Dunmer sorcerer, the spells they use
Nord
are
would
going to
win.
be they're going to use different methods of spellcasting, namely in their language and their invocations. And so if the Dunmer wants to somehow counterspell or know what the Nord is going to do, he needs to know what language that Nord is speaking, because that's otherwise how else is he going to know what spell it is, right? And so I included that in the scrolls too. So I made that Dwemer scroll. So maybe a Dwemer created a scroll to summon a Centurion. And
All right, so that makes me want to ask you then. Within your campaign, what happens when someone tries to use a pigeon language as the basis for their spell?
Oh.
Well, so they have to be actually.
Ah,
While
Australian is a pigeon language.
Yeah. So let's say, for
I
instance,
can
you
certainly
have an
agree with
Altmer. Let's say, for instance, you have an Altmer who speaks Altmeris, and then is having to deal with Daedra on a regular basis. So they also understand Daedric speech to an extent. So they have a pigeon of Altmeris and Daedric. What happens?
I actually
when
have
you try to cast spells in that way.
I actually have a feat for that.
Ooh, fun.
I wrote a feat. So this is my player's handbook. Note how it has the Imperial Dragon embossed on it.
Of course it does.
It's leather bound. Here's the first page.
Ooh, that's really nice.
Zora.
Moon and Star.
So my game takes place during the Elder Scrolls 3. This is Morrowind. That's my game. And so I basically took the basis of the intro to Morrowind and I included it in the first page. So we've got Azura's symbol. We've got each event is preceded by a prophecy, but without the hero there is no event. Quote by Zoran Arctus. And at the bottom it says many fall but one remains. So that's a reference to the Lost Prophecy. And then let's see, feats. That's page 69. Now, every page was
X number.
Every page was blank. I hand ruled every page.
Oh my!
Mm-hmm.
And I hand wrote every page.
Dang.
I spent about 2 years on this.
Wow, that's impressive.
Very cool.
Let's see. So page 69. I have all the pages numbered. 67, 69. Let's see. There was a feat called, let's see, Cunning Caster. You use language to confuse enemy casters. And then let's see what the description is. Cunning Caster. Using your knowledge of linguistics and magical formula, you can cast in your non-standard incanting language using magical formulaic structure from another language's spellcraft theory. So basically, you're taking two languages and you're merging them into one spell.
It sounds like Pigeon.
Yeah, and so basically, when you cast a spell using this feat, the opposing spellcraft check's DC is increased by 15. So it makes it so much harder for someone to understand what you're doing. So if either of the two languages used in casting are spoken by the one making the spellcraft check, this lowers the DC to plus 10. If the one making the spellcraft check knows at least one of the two languages being used and has this feat, the DC is only raised by plus 5. So if another caster also has this caster and knows how to be tricky with language, then go, okay, I see what you're doing. And it's still tough, but it's not as tough as it would be if I didn't know. Yeah, this is mostly homebrew. I created stats for all kinds of stuff, all the races.
Have you published this online at all?
I do have it on the Telmoris website, actually.
Oh, great.
This makes me wonder how you would fare if you tried to run the unofficial Elder Scrolls RPG.
Oh, maybe. I've seen it, and I think I've got it downloaded somewhere.
Yeah, they continue to update it, which is fantastic. I'm glad they're continuing to work. I'm glad people are continuing to work on it.
I know that eventually, once I finish this actual Morrowind storyline, I want to update it to 5th edition.
I was actually going to ask about that.
Yeah, and then move on to move on to Oblivion storyline. And because it's tabletop, I'm not confined to one area. So we actually started at in North Point in High Rock before we ended up in Morrowind. So we traveled through Skyrim a little bit. We went down into Cyrodiil, and then we got shipped to Morrowind, and that was.
So I'm kind of curious about something now that we've been talking about language for a bit. So, in terms of writing script, we know that Altmaris, Aliadun, Falmaris, and Dwemeris all have very similar writing scripts. The key differences among them
from a base language.
Yeah, the key differences among them being that Dwemeris is exceptionally simplistic in terms of how you write the character. You like at most, I'm pretty sure the most complex characters in Dwemeris take like 4 strokes, and that's about it. Meanwhile, Falmaris, when you look at that, it is incredibly poetic in how
it's a lot more on. It's a lot more on that.
It is, yeah. It's a lot more complicated.
This makes me wonder, because of this implication that they all came from a base language, if you understand one of these languages, how easy do you think it is to understand the others?
It would depend which way you're going. Like, if you're learning from the root language, it would probably be much easier to learn the other languages, and that's me, like, knowing a little bit about linguistic itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's a case-by-case basis, because looking at Dwemer and Altmer right now, I have Dwemer handwritten here. Next to
Dwemer and Altmer, or at least according to some texts, in particular looking at the Elnofex languages, Dwemer and Altmer both come from Aldmeris. And then presumably Falmer comes from both Altmer and Dwemeris, whereas Aliadun comes from Altmer.
Yeah, so I mean, looking at them, they're very similar in most cases.
Now, Aliadun coming from Altmeris is very curious to me, because I know that one of the things with the aliens was that they also would keep records of the Dawn Era languages.
Yeah.
Or at least the language that existed during the Dawn Era.
Or
So
like
it
a
makes me
Rosetta
curious
Stone kind of thing.
if that might be why even with having people who know the root language of Aliadun, you still have trouble actually figuring out a lot of the words in Aliadun, simply because Aliadun would be a Creole of Altmaris and a Dawn Era language.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, it's definitely a case by case kind of thing. I mean, if and it depends on the person doing it too, because I mean,
I'm back.
If you've got a fucking idiot who somehow learned the Dwemer alphabet, and then they looked at Falmer, and went, it's not Dwemer, so they're not shaped the same. But then someone who's very smart, who knows Dwemer or Falmer or whatever, and looks at the other and goes, "Okay,
all right, I can see
see
what this character should mean."
There are a lot of similarities between some of these. I can probably fill in the gaps here and make it up, but we also have to bear in mind that from our perspective in the real world, the languages in the Elder Scrolls, with the exception of Dovazul is the most complicated one out of the whole bunch. Everything else is just a simple replacement cipher.
Yeah. It's a simple replacement cipher, but then it also gets weird when it becomes a replacement cipher, but not for your native language.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume that's just a necessary sacrifice for the players.
How many game studios are gonna put a fucking linguist on payroll? Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, hey, someone get Tolkien on the phone.
I was gonna say Chomsky.
So Chomsky's also a good one.
Whoever wrote the languages for Game of Thrones.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. In some cases, it is definitely just a direct cipher, but then there are other cases where, like, fucking in the Altmer language, how do you say sewer? You say Hausorial. That's going to be written very different from just trying to replace the word sewer.
There are expressions and some Elnofex is a cool language.
Did we just drop there or?
No.
I think we might have a bit of a lull.
My wife is talking to me, and God forbid I don't respond.
Yeah, that's fair. I actually have it's like slightly off topic question, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, like, before, I don't know if it's ever been brought up in like forums and stuff like that, but is there a possibility for a quote-unquote modern setting in the Elder Scrolls vis-a-vis Shadowrun at Is 2?
Dude, yeah.
Yes.
That's Coda.
Oh, fuck. Dude, I haven't read Coda. I need to do that.
Yeah, you should.
Very cool.
Yeah,
here's the thing, because it really starts. It really starts with Redguard, because that's when both Coleman and Kirkbride started kind of.
It starts with Battlespire, actually.
Oh, Battlespire. Okay, that's a good point. Where it really kind of took on a life of sci fantasy rather than straight up fantasy. Yeah.
My head canon is that the Meretic era was far more scientifically advanced.
Yeah, and that may be a thing. I've heard theories that, you know, magic, science, whatever, we're going backwards as we progress through time, which may just be how linear time presents itself in the Elder Scrolls. I don't know.
Yeah, it has a very Tolkien thing where each era is less magical and cosmic than the last.
Yeah. But Coda in particular takes place in the far future, specifically the 5th era.
900 years into the 5th era or something.
Yeah, which I mean, 900 years is a long time. What were we as humans doing 900 years ago? Let's see, that was the 12th century, so
not a great lot.
Shakespeare wasn't even born yet. We've got maybe, let's see, when was Chaucer? Chaucer was like 1400s.
Cool Ship was probably,
and Dante was about the same time.
If I recall correctly, Cool Ship was going down in China and in North America.
Yeah, I mean we're talking super old. Like you can't even say off the top of your head what happened 900 years ago. So, yeah, we've got Coda that's going on. It's in the far future, and
there's also 9th era shit.
Oh yeah. Well, there's 9th and there's nth era shit. So
and there's the Trans-Zero Insurgency, which is a parallel universe.
Yeah, there's all kinds of weird like science fiction shit going on.
Can I get into that?
In a minute. Let me finish describing Coda.
Okay.
So Coda takes place in the future, and it takes on a lot more sci-fi elements, to where it becomes obvious that it's incredible. It's practically cyberpunk, really.
Oh yes.
And
kind of like Dune, true.
Yeah. Whereas the Elder Scrolls prior has been science fiction with a veneer of fantasy.
Yeah.
Here's dragons. Here's magic. Here's whatever. But really, we've got time. We got time travel and robots and spaceships.
Internet.
And it's all internet. We've got it all just kind of under the surface. But then you bring in Coda. So landfall happens. The Dunmer and the Khajiit escape. They're living on the moons now. Numidium eventually makes it to the moon, specifically Master. And the main character, Jubal Lun Sul, he is tasked. Yep, he is tasked with killing the Numidium.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, there's this woman he's gonna marry, and the only way he can marry her is if he kills Numidium.
How do you do that?
And so he's super into the sermons specifically, and he takes those teachings to heart, and eventually he looks at what is it, sermon 26 or something, where it talks about the code of Mafala.
That's sermon 11.
What's that?
Sermon 11.
Sermon 11? Okay. Oh, well, that makes perfect sense, actually. And it says, when you approach God, you cut off both of your hands, because God is armored head to toe in terror. Something like that. And so God, in this case, is Numidium. When you approach God, you don't bring your hands. Your hands represent intent and deceit and that kind of
duality.
Yeah. Do away with it. You don't need those hands. God has no need for theory. According to the codes of Mafala, there is no difference between the theorist and the terrorist. You're bringing theory. You're trying to be a terrorist when you're approaching God. You can't do that. You need to approach God using God's methods. And so Jubal approaches Numidium and reasons with it. Numidium, who has always been about denial. No. Jubal convinces it to say maybe, and then yes. And then he kills it using its own philosophies. Specifically, in the comic script, there's an empty speech bubble, which is how Numidium talks. Jubal creates an empty speech bubble and beheads Numidium with it. So it's a little fourth wall breaking. But that in and of itself is a metaphor. That's part of why Coda is so interesting, because
Coda is reminds me of something like 2001: A Space Odyssey, where a lot of it is obviously not literal.
Yeah.
The ending in particular is a huge metaphor.
Yeah. But if you haven't read it yet, I'm not going to spoil the ending.
Awesome.
But he kills Numidium, and then you get to see who this woman is, and it's whoa! How did that? Wow. Okay. And there's a part in this in Coda, and I get the feeling this is where it loses a lot of people.
The superhero stuff.
Yeah, the whole superhero thing. Because Jubal in his narration, he mentions how, this part of our history is available for free in the Dream Sleeve. It's streaming. He's talking about like fucking Netflix. You can go on to Netflix. You can watch this superhero retelling of history, directed by fucking Michael Bay. Like it's so not historically accurate. But it still has elements of history, and so it's and this comes from Kirkbride's.
It's the Tribunal as superheroes.
Yeah, well,
the Justice League of Vardenfell.
Yeah, not just the Tribunal, also Dagothor and Molag Bal too.
It kind of like you say, William the Conqueror was being played by the guy that does Spider.
Yeah, and really it comes from Kirkbride's own love of comic books. And
there's a reason why the story dedicates so much time to that. It's a double commentary.
It is, yeah.
I would love to see an Elder Scrolls comics series, like a proper one.
There was one for Redguard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was how we saw
I want to see Elder Scrolls books,
the dress slave
Elder Scrolls
camps.
comics.
Yeah.
So I want to bring up something kind of weird.
Go ahead.
Do you guys feel that Molag Bal technically did the one thing that should be impossible in that he created something new?
Well, did he really create anything, or did he just warp things until they were basically unrecognized?
No. See, the warping things, that's for stuff like Daedric Titans and whatnot. That's warping something. But the Zivkin are very different from that. Because they are a forced combination of Zivalai and Dremora.
Well, let's finish describing Coda real quick, and then we can get back to that. This part in particular, I think of it like this superhero bit. It's like, what's a good example? Like The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. Yeah, I mean there's some historical stuff in it, but it never happened, and definitely not like that. Vivek, Almalexia, Sothasil, Dagothor, and Molag Bal, they are this kind of Justice League sort of thing, and
also Boetia, Azura, and the Trigodaedra and shit.
I don't know, they're not there.
But I imagine in that version.
Sure, maybe in like an extended, in-universe universe, yeah. And there are people who have televisions for heads, which is more of a commentary of like advertising too. It's so multi-layered. I love
it. And we have the Numidian as a giant mech, and Vivek goes giant form against it, and it's a Power Rangers fight.
Yeah. Are you talking about Landfall Day 1?
No, I'm talking about the superhero part in Coda.
Oh, okay. I don't remember that bit. I know there's a bit where they're talking about Yagram Bagarn is the intellective. He's Mojo from the DC universe. That's what he is. And they're trying to fight off basically the blight of the Sixth House. But Dagothor's also, though, like, it's weird. It's the history has been so fucked up.
And they mentioned
like you see in Hollywood.
Medium destroy time, so people don't remember their own history.
Yeah. It's an inaccurate retelling of history, basically. And Alandro Sewell has like a camcorder, and he's like
Jimmy Olsen. He's the witness.
Yeah, and
he's
so
taking pictures.
He's kind of like a what's April from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or the
Jimmy Olsen.
Or the one guy from or the girl from Gargoyles. Anyone watch Gargoyles as a kid?
Oh God, yeah.
The chick who's a reporter, and she's like friends with the Gargoyles. Yeah, Alandro Sewell was basically that character. And yeah, I think that's where a lot of people get lost on Coda. They go, "Oh, it's so shitty! Like, how can?" And And I'm like, well, you're missing the point.
Of the scene. Also, the whole reason Jubal brings that up is to say he brings up 3 versions of Vivek's past.
Yeah.
One is completely historically accurate, which like, oh, Vivek was a street prostitute and he met Nerevar and stuff. The other is a very simplified kids folktale shit like, oh, Vivek was a camel in the ancient times and he found a stone with magical powers and became a god. And the
I don't think I've ever heard the street prostitute thing.
You didn't?
I've heard before, but I don't remember.
It comes up twice. One in What My Beloved Taught Me, which is a text by Michael Kirkbride, and in Coda.
Oh yeah. No, Vec was definitely a street urchin, kind of prostitute, just
and criminal.
Yeah,
doing whatever he could to get by.
A thief. Yeah, I mean Vivek is I would venture to say Vivek is one of the most complex characters in literature ever.
Yeah. I'm glad you didn't say within the context of the series. I haven't found one more complex than him.
Yeah.
In the context of the series, I think he's the most complex.
It's because he's everything at once.
Yeah. And that's
trying to trace that.
Yeah, and that's been worked into his desire, into his
there
being.
There are some which I think come close. Like Sota Sil, I think is my second.
Sota Sil is pretty great.
Yeah.
But Sota Sil, we don't have a whole lot on. I mean, we get some of it in ESO. He regrets the death of his sister and things like that. A lot of those character shaping.
The memories of his are great.
Yeah, that's pretty good stuff.
There's some interesting stuff in ESO. The implication that the destruction of Ald Sotha when he was a kid, possibly influencing his Daedric Pact after Gilverdale.
I hadn't picked up on that.
Oh, really?
That's an astute observation, I think.
I love the memory.
Wait. I can't remember what book it is. I'm gonna look it up at some point, but my phone is a potato.
There's a reference to the lessons on the Sota Sil memories.
Is there?
Yes. It's a memory where Sota Sil is talking to Devate Fear. They're talking about a bunch of Dwemer animunculi who fell to the sea.
I don't remember that one. Yeah. I remember the one where Fear was like, I'm not going to be calling you a god. But I don't remember that.
They're talking about Dwemer centurions and shit that fell to the sea. And they're like, we could use them to our advantage. It's during the war. And I think that's a reference to Sermon 36.
This Chaucer Sparkling Maid was actually quite good.
Oh, that's good.
No, I was skeptical because it was sparkling, but no, it's very good.
No, but Coda is good stuff. It's interesting.
It really is.
I think my opinion of Coda, it has a good start and a fantastic ending.
Well,
but I think it lags a bit in the middle. I'm not the biggest fan of it.
I see so often people say, "Oh, well, Coda is just fan fiction, it's shitty writing." I'm literally an English teacher, and it's not shitty writing.
No, it's not. It's very complex, and it's multi.
Coda is great writing,
and
I think is honestly.
Codex, the problem with that is like, if you're just a guy who just played the games and never cared about deep lore and you go into Coda, it's not for you.
Yeah, I mean that's like saying Dracula's written shittily because you can't follow what's going on. It's
Coda at least expects you to have familiarity with the lessons, the love letter, and other stuff by MK.
Yeah. It doesn't hold your hand, and that's something that I definitely value in the media I consume. If it doesn't assume you're an idiot, then I like it that much more. Let's take let's keep it in universe. The difference between Morrowind and Skyrim. You get a quest, you're given directions. You go, okay, you're gonna head north until you see a stone cairn, then you're gonna turn to the west, and you're gonna head in a straight line past this landmark until you meet a door. You're gonna go into that door and you're gonna fight the wizard inside. Something like that. I made that up. But then Skyrim, hey, you're gonna get a map marker.
No, it's not. No! It's even worse. It's even worse because you can use a spell that draws a line on the ground.
Yeah. So if you can't use your fucking journal and figure it out on your own, it becomes so much more hand-holdy. It's like, oh, I'll take your race bus to go, and it's and I like when my media appreciates my intelligence.
Yeah.
I have the capability of putting things together. I don't need you to tell me how things are supposed to be put together, like how to get to a place, or just give me directions and I'll figure it out.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah,
and they do that, and they simultaneously insult you while doing it. They're like, "Oh, you have to ask this."
Yeah. I mean, it's I play a lot of Pokemon too, and it's the same thing there. It's something that I'm noticing across the board. The first Pokemon games, Red and Blue, 1996, well, 98 for Americans. You were given your vague quest, and you go off and you battle all the gyms, and hey, it's great. But then in the newer games, I have Let's Go Pikachu for the Switch, and it's so easy, and I don't think it's because I'm a 28-year-old man. I don't think that's why it's so easy. It's they just give you the wins. Yeah, here's some items you can use. They put an NPC there, and hey, let's make this easier for the player. No, bitch, make it hard. I don't want it easy.
There is a calculated move behind a lot of that, making games more accessible, making media more accessible. In some ways it's really good, but then there was also that aspect of, okay, but this is to a point. This is just trying to make more money.
Yeah, and people like me can see that. Oh, I see what you're doing. You're money grabbing. That's what you're doing. Yeah. You are shitting on the art.
Now, see, that makes me a bit curious. What happens if a company does that with a game with the express purpose of getting more fans, and then the next following game, things start going back to being complex again?
But
because now they have fans who are invested in the series.
If a fan who became invested in the series because of, or at least in part of the fact that the game is easy to follow, how many are they going to lose when they make the next game more complicated, more difficult?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't go backwards with that.
There's a general worry that that's what Pokemon is doing. Okay, I think they've done a bit of a smart thing where they've kind of etched it into two paths, where they've got the path of the more casual players, which is like games like Let's Go and Pokemon Go and stuff like that, where you don't have to be good at a thing.
See, I'm a competitive battler.
Yeah.
And like what happens in the story doesn't fucking matter to me at all. I want to get the post game where I can build a team and I can beat the shit out of my friends. That's what I want. I want to be, the team building and the min-maxing and the strategy. That's what I'm interested in.
You see,
it looks like they are going towards that again. Yeah.
What's that, Silence?
that's the bit that I utterly hate. I would rather spend my time just going through the story and not having to worry about all that shit.
Sure, yeah, and I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm speaking as a competitive player, looking at the story and going, okay, this is way dumbed down. You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm speaking from an outside perspective. I can see this from the outside. So how does it feel from the inside?
Well,
so Elder Scrolls.
Honestly, speaking in terms of Pokemon, if we're going with this example, I kind of feel that the stories have always been incredibly simplistic.
Yeah, it has.
Like, it doesn't matter which generation you're playing. The stories are not getting progressively more simplistic. You're just noticing it more because you're getting older and you're getting more aware of stuff that is more complex.
And I've thought about that. I've thought about that, and I've played through.
I mean,
I played through Red when it came out in the Virtual Console. Maybe, gosh, what was that? 3 years ago? 2 years ago? And I mean, it was the same. I mean, yeah, I understood more of the mechanics. I know how it works and everything. Psychic types are overpowered because the only good bug type move is Pin Missile, and the only good Pokemon that learns it is Jolteon. It's not even a bug type, so you miss out on the same type attack bonus. Like, it's bullshit, but it's more difficult. Whereas in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, most recent real games in the franchise, you get the experience share. It applies to your whole team. You get the experience from catching Pokemon. You shouldn't get that from catching them. You should get that from battling and knocking them out. I don't want to get experience.
Have to battle them to get there. At least most of them.
But that's not how it was in the older games. So we have created
Puritan there.
What's that?
I see you're going bit rose-tinted glasses there.
I mean, maybe a little bit, but the fact remains we add subtle little things to make it easier. It's like power creep.
At some point, this was an Elder Scrolls cast.
Yes, it was.
No, it wasn't. This has always been local beer cast. Anyway, the thing I wanted to say about Coda, I was thinking about this earlier while you guys were discussing it. I think another one of the bigger reasons as to why it can be somewhat difficult for people to get into Coda is purely the fact that Coda, the way it is written, is meant to be a transcript for a comic. It is meant to be the base outline for a comic for someone to draw the comic.
I would argue
that's why you have so many instructions for how that comic is meant to be drawn, for how each page and panel should be. So as a result, it can be somewhat weird reading it because all you're seeing is just the description of what should be there, when this is written as something that is very much meant to be part of a visual media.
Yeah.
So really, someone just needs to go out and actually just draw the thing.
Yeah.
I found a guy on DeviantArt who's actually trying to create the comic, which would be really cool if their art didn't totally suck.
The guy who does Kill 6 billion demons should do it. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, Kill 6 billion demons, dude.
That would be awesome.
I would. Oh, that's a lore boner right there.
We need to get a massive funding.
Yeah, well, we know they're aware of Coda because part of the inspiration for Kill 6 billion demons was the 36 frames of event. So,
more like he straight up stole a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. So Tiffany, what else do you got for us?
Oh my god. I don't know. I mean, honestly, when I read Coda a couple of months ago, it kind of like it got me. Like I posted in the group on the anniversary post. Like it literally got me jump started with like literature and reading and thinking creatively again for the first time in ages. So it's super important to me in that regard. But it's also got me thinking like people have their own different headcanons and things. what's going on with Vardenfell? Like, I know from, just reading articles and different papers and stuff like that, that after volcanism, it doesn't take a whole lot to bring an area back to a lush state. So once that, once Red Mountain is done doing its thing, or at least calms down to a reasonable level, like what's the rate of return on all of that sort of stuff? Are we going to see an impact on the environment from, the impact of the Heart of Lorcan? Are we going to see like lava tubes and things like that?
I think it's likely we'll see a fairly major impact on the environment. The bigger problem with Vardenfell is that I believe that with Red Mountain erupting, a lot of the infrastructure and a lot of the buildings were thereby destroyed. So as a direct result, when you have that refugee crisis moving out of Vardenfell and moving out of Morrowind, you, as a result, don't really have a lot of people who are going back to fix it. Which is more to say that there are probably some people who are going there to fix it, but it's going to take a long time for places like Balmora and Aldrin to come back.
Right. I'm thinking more like ecological impacts than like infrastructure and sociological. Like, what kind of impact are we going to see on the wildlife and stuff like that?
Well, probably a lot of it's going to die because...
Yeah, a lot of it's probably going to just die outright. I mean, we already know cliff racers are extinct because of Jib. Good old Jib.
Yep. No, that's very true. But
we know cliff racers are extinct. I would say the other wildlife, because of the fact that I'm pretty sure a lot of the animals that exist on Vardenfell also exist on the mainland, it could be likely to say that there could be some conservationists who work to move some animals from the mainland back to Vardenfell, assuming all animals on Vardenfell die post-eruption.
I wouldn't assume that everything is dead, though. Like, look at
I doubt everything
areas.
It isn't all dead.
Right.
Well,
and
according to
we've got Kwama mines. They're underground. I mean,
according
whatever.
to Nelof in Skyrim, he says that it took a decade.
That's another unrelated thing. Neloth's never been to the mainland? What?
Sure.
He's a powerful... Well, I mean, he straight up said when I was playing through, like I said, I'm playing through Dragonborn again. So I'm spending a lot of time with Neloth. He said, I've never been to the mainland.
I can see why he wouldn't want to go to the mainland. He doesn't give a shit.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Like it is the most typical.
Hold on, Matt, what's up?
You were talking about ecological impacts of the explosion of Red Mountain, right?
Or just in general, the effect that the Heart of Lorcan. I mean, we've seen what it can do to Hearthstones. Are we gonna see like overpowered like wildlife and possibly like flora, fauna, and fungi?
Yeah,
you mean like some Fallout shit?
I mean, not in the strict sense of that, but I can see how you can make that association. It's not incorrect.
I have a good example though, like with okay, so you're talking about the mainland, right?
I was talking about Vardenfell. That was kind of like a side note. I was like, wait a minute, that just reminded me. Neloth said he never went to the mainland. That's a side note.
But with like the crazy flora and fauna and everything, like after the explosion of Red Mountain, a good way to compare it would be with, say, go from Fallout 3 absolute nothingness to Far Cry New Dawn, and it's just plants and crazy animals everywhere because of the fallout.
Right. Super lush.
Yeah. And like species you've never seen before. That would be cool.
Yeah. It's there's a lot of hope there, I think. There's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, it would be really, really interesting to see it evolve alongside the political the political landscape of post Red Year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I get the feeling that the Heartstones that we see in Dragonborn, that those are kind of the last gasp of the Heart of Lorkhan, because the Heart of Lorkhan was destroyed 200 years ago.
The physical form was released and shit.
Yeah. So
yeah, and isn't
which I mean, and that has more to do with the relationship between Lorkhan and Akatosh, because Akatosh is trapped
the heart
by
of the world.
Yeah, and that has to do with the two towers. Now the dragons doomed to travel between them.
There is something I would say regarding the destruction of the Heart of Lorkhan. If you assume that the Heart of Lorkhan, that you can relate it to like a chunk of uranium, then destroying the Heart of Lorkhan is effectively the equivalent of blowing up a chunk of uranium. Yeah, it's going to release a lot of power in a short burst, but it's also going to more quickly dissipate than it would have otherwise.
Yeah, it's going to have a quicker decay rate.
As for what's going to happen to wildlife, maybe Nirncrux is a really weird thing. I was going to say maybe something similar to what happens when you apply Nirncrux to living beings.
Yeah,
I didn't consider that.
But I'm not entirely sure because, again, we don't really know what Nirncrux is.
Yeah, I just use it to make my armor.
Listen, man, I don't know what it is, but it makes me glow in the dark, and I like it.
Oh man, that's just imagine like the ecological effects of everyone just walking around with Nirncrux armor.
God.
Like they're secretly
not just
walking around.
Effects, just like I want to say one of the things is that if you don't know how to process Nirncrux correctly, it's very poisonous.
Yeah.
So I can just imagine a group of people walking around wearing Nirncrux armor, but they didn't understand the concept of how you're supposed to process it. So they're just slowly dying as they're walking around.
Yes, I want to see a quest like that.
Potential
like at this point, it seems like Nirncrux is literally radium.
Oh my gosh. But that's like
new headcanon accepted.
Like, it's really dumb. It's the magical equivalent of radium. It can be safe if you know how to process it right.
All right. Well, I'm gonna end the recording here.
Sure.
We're about 2.
Yeah, about 2 hours.
2 hours.
We started at like 7:20, so it's about 2 hours.
2:15 or so.
It's it's 30 past midnight here.
Yep. So we'll call that good. So long, internet. Until next week.
Bye.
Maybe we're every
maybe
week.
I'll be there. I don't know.
Every week, either 8 p.m. or 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Or sometimes 7 p.m.
Sometime maybe.
Where I am.
Occasionally.
It depends on whether I have a child to put to bed or not. Really, is how that works.
Valid.
So, someone's talking podcast. Everybody wave bye.
Bye.
Bye.